I've got The Machine, and it's not so much for
Bert Kreischer.
Bert, thank you. I want to see Mark Hamill. He looks fantastic. Him playing, seeing those comic chops that he so obviously has. I need to see that. My love of film, in many respects, started as a 10-year-old watching Star Wars. Mark Hamill is not going to be with us forever, and he's still healthy and still doing great work. And this is one of the few films where I'm like, I want this to be good. The Machine. That's why I want to see it. That's why I want to see it. That's why I'm excited about seeing it.
Hopefully we have Mark Hamill for another couple decades. I would assume, I would hope. He seems like he's in pretty good health. He looks like he's healthy in this film, at least. I think I've seen Bert Kreischer before somewhere, like, you flipping past Comedy Central, but I've never sat down and watched anything of his. This is a film that is also on my list. If a trailer's supposed to make you want to go for it and kind of grab you by the balls and make you want to watch a film, this is that trailer. When Mark Hamill comes in halfway through, balls to the wall, like, he's not swearing in the video, but it's pretty darn close. There's no Luke Skywalker in here. There's not even any Joker. It's just they don't look like father and son at all. But such that when you rewatch it and you go, oh, and then when you actually look into him, Bert Kreischer, the person, because it is Bert Kreischer. That is his name. He is. I may be mispronouncing that, but it is.
The guy's 50.
Yeah, and he's. But he was the inspiration for the movie Van Wilder. And you look at him, and he's walking around on stage, and he's balding. He's got the great beard. He's walking around shirtless on stage at his age,
charm though,
and with his heft. And you're like, is this Van Wilder? And sure enough, if you look at old pictures of Bert Kreischer from the 90s and early 2000s, he looks a lot like Ryan. He does look a lot like Ryan Reynolds did in Van Wilder. This movie is also based on a loose retelling, a very loose retelling of his time studying abroad. And that was
I buy that he's kind of Van Wilder.
Yeah, and that's that was the other thing that kind of got me about this was the whole the Russia angle, the Russian mob. It's kind of like an easy grab as far as like a comedic reference, but the way they approach it, and then going back and rewatching some of his stand-up where he's talking about the machine and the story behind the machine, it does kind of stoke the creative, like, okay, well, this is interesting. This part of this, not saying it's a biopic, but part of this actually happened to him in some way, shape, or form. He's not just pulling it out
allegedly.
of his butt. Yeah, well, yeah, some version of this. At least he's built a stand-up career off of it. So,
yeah. Well, yeah. This is why that's the sure, kind of.
It is interesting to know,
I got
too.
drunk with some Russians on a train.
Yeah,
not exactly a hard thing to do.
And and also mirroring Van Wilder, he did spend 7 years in college. For a guy that I'd never heard of before watching this trailer, I would not put this on the top of my list unless there is a good reason for it. And this trailer, called The Machine, grabs your attention by the balls. The Machine. There's just something about
worthy.
Yeah, and this is
screen grab.
Yeah, this is the least likely film to end up on number one on my list. Before I started doing all the
worthy number one though.
Yeah, before I started looking up all the films for this month, it's like download all of them. I was like, what the heck is this? The Machine. I was thinking with a title like The Machine that it was probably going to be some sort of art house flick, Oscar hopefuls for some reason coming out in summertime. Ha ha ha. And then I watched it, and I watched it again, and I watched it a third time. And I'm still kind of dumbfounded as to what to expect from this movie, which is, I guess, part of what is titillating me a little bit, that draws it to number one on my list. Yes, Mark Hamill going full Mark Hamill. I didn't even know there was a full Mark Hamill gear to go to, but he's going full Mark Hamill in a way that I've never seen Mark Hamill go before. And I didn't think that in a movie with two different films about stand-up comedians playing themselves with their fathers, I didn't think that this would end up at number one on my list, but The Machine is...
And then, yet, here it is.
Yeah, well, part of it is I am a huge Van Wilder fan. I'm a huge fan of that kind of comedy. And it's funny, I don't think of Van Wilder every day, but it is on my list of 2000s comedies, and I do like that style of comedy. I love Ryan Reynolds. I love the whole bit. But I never stopped to think that Van Wilder was actually based on a real guy. So the fact that we're getting a look at what Van Wilder would look like if he were fat and 50. Which kind of sort of makes...
back on his corrupt past.
Yeah, kind of.
His debauched past.
Yeah, and in the same way that The Fabelmans kind of looks back and looks forward simultaneously at Steven Spielberg's parents from different perspectives. Because, like, if E.T. is Steven Spielberg in his 30s looking at his parents in his 30s, and The Fabelmans is him looking back at his parents in his 70s, this is sort of the opposite of that. It's looking back at himself, looking forward. Bert Kreischer with Van Wilder being the substitute, and him now in his late, the clip in the trailers from his 40s.
Might be given this bit of nonsense.
Yeah,
too
but
much credit there.
But it's
making it analogous to
an Oscar-winning
one of the greatest films made by one of the greatest filmmakers.
But it is interesting looking at a character 2 decades later and the real life version of, and this is a guy who, if you look at his pictures from when he was in his 20s, looks a lot like Ryan Reynolds. There's a reason why they cast Ryan Reynolds in a Bert Kreischer type role.
Neither are documentaries.
No.
This is where we learn inspired by.
Yes.
Like, okay, well, we've got this kind of a couple of interesting anecdotes. Now we got to make up a movie. Thanks for the inspiration. Now we will make up a movie.
But that's part of it, though.
Wilder. We have an inspiration. Now we will make up a movie.
To me, it's an interesting question from a screenwriting perspective and also from a film fan perspective. What happens to the college party guy when he turns 50? Is he still doing keggers and keg stands? And is he walking around shirtless when he's put on a few pounds?
Isn't that the final of the Cornetto trilogy? Edgar Wright. It's been done.
Yeah.
The party guy and having to deal with that past.
So all of that, along with Ryan Reynolds and Van Wilder, all of it put together, is why it ends up at number one on my list.